Hi everyone, it's Fiona Marks here from fionamarks.com, and I'm back today with another astrology and press clippings. You guys know I love reading stories in the press and thinking about how astrology interacts with those stories. I've always got heaps of ideas to record for you, but it doesn't necessarily make it onto my computer. But one of the ones that fascinated me in the recent weeks has been the obstruction in the Suez Canal, where the tanker ship Ever Given got stuck. And I think it captured so many imaginations around the world. One of the reasons I think I loved these memes that came out when you're a life coach, this is the kind of thing that you see all the time, people finding like their tasks. You see this, my tasks and the big ship stuck in the obstructing the flow, and then this tiny little, you can't even see it on that screen, but the tiny little earth digger, dutifully chipping away at the task. I loved all of those. It really resonated with me, that sense that sometimes things seem overwhelming, and so I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, I live right on a shipping pathway, right? So this is the Atlantic. Let's zoom out a little bit further. So here's the Atlantic coming into Lisbon, and I live just around about here, looking out at the lighthouse. So I see ships all day long. Obviously, a little bit less since COVID, but still all day long. And if we just lift our person onto the lighthouse, yeah, you can see this lighthouse is right in the middle of the river or the ocean, where the ocean meets the river. And all day long, I see ships, I see submarines, aircraft carriers, enormous tankers, cruise ships. They all go by like this. So it's something that is very much in my awareness, is how boats travel. Also because, let's see if there's a better shot of that. The way the river runs into, that's that little lighthouse there. The way the river runs in, the deepest part is actually here closest to where I live. And then it has to zig over here to get underneath the bridge. So they really come, it feels like, right past the window. Okay, so now you know why this captured my imagination so much. And then, of course, it was actually freed around about the full moon, right? They used that tidal surge that comes with the full moon, happened to be a moon that was closer to Earth than normal. So it's already got that astronomical feature, this story. Okay, but what can we say about it as far as astrology? What insights could we expect to see? So I'm thinking about, I want to know, how are canals represented in Vedic astrology, right? So I get out my trusty Karakas book, and I'll put the details of the book in the YouTube details. It's not a perfect book by any means, but when you're searching for things that are a bit unusual, it's great to have a resource to flick to. So canals, we want to see Cancer, okay, sign of Cancer. Vehicles, what are the astrological indicators of vehicles? We've got quite a few here. We've got the fourth house, we've got Venus, and we've got high-end vehicles represented by the 11th house. So let's write all of those down. These are the kind of things that I would be expecting to see if I want to look into how does this work. What about obstructions and delays? Now, I could have photographed the book, but I would have had to photograph about 5 pages because there's so many indicators. So let's go to the trusty internet. Saturn is a character for obstruction and delays. And another Saturn one here, Saturn, where did we find this? Anyway, you're reading it probably better than I am, but that it's also an indicator for obstructions and delays. Yes, I'm hoping you're seeing that, because I'm just not seeing it in front of me yet. I know I pulled it out. for that reason. Okay, so I'm expecting then to see Saturn as involved in this situation as well. So I'm looking for Cancer, 4th house, Venus, 11th house, and Saturn. Now, what other factors are coming in here? Water, of course. What sort of indicators do I get for water? 4th house, Moon, Venus, and Cancer. So I'm beginning to see some overlap now. It's really confirming some of the indicators that I already have. And anything else? Oh, just wanted to point out that the shipping business is covered by Jupiter. And then another thing that I would imagine that I was going to see would be fixed signs, because the signs are split into active signs, fixed signs, and mutable signs. So being as this is an obstruction, I would be wanting to see some involvement of fixed signs, and they are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. Okay, so these are the kind of things that are on my mind. Now I have to decide what chart do I think I want to look at? Now, I could hear arguments for looking obviously at the chart of the ship. That would be a great thing. You could probably do a chart of the Suez Canal, because I'm sure there was a date when it was opened or something like that. But I decided to just go with a chart of Egypt because it's an asset that's nationalized, that gives income to that country. So I went and looked up the birth time of Egypt. And I have to say that usually I just do people's charts, right? So this is not necessarily my area of expertise, but you see a story as interesting as this, you want to have a look. What's the astrology? And as well as the birth chart, I'm thinking maybe I want to have a look at the D4, because the 4th house resonates so much for vehicles and also for wealth beyond one's means. And I do feel like the Suez Canal is something like that. It really produces, it's an asset that produces a lot of wealth. And then, of course, let's look at the D16. I'll also put the link in the YouTube description. This is the Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 2. And you can see right up the top there that it's for vehicles, and that, the sun is the body of the vehicle. We've got the mechanics, we've got journeys, the electrical system, we've got the vehicles themselves. Okay. So I'm thinking I want to look at the Rashi chart, maybe the D4, and definitely the D16. Right, so let's have a look at the Egypt Rashi chart. Few things that we can pick out straight away. This is where you probably need your magnifying glass, but maybe you can see, like me, that this is an Aries ascendant. That makes it nice and easy for us, because that means the house numbers and the sign numerology, they match up. So you get a stronger resonance of those things. We can notice that Venus is here in the 2nd house of resources. So, we know that vehicles are represented by Venus, and it's in the 2nd house. So, yep, that's kind of matching with some of the things we're expecting to find. Another thing we can notice is that Saturn is exalted in Libra. And of course, we know that Libra is the sign that denotes trade. So that's, just an interesting thing to note. Rahu is in Aquarius, and Aquarius is also the 11th house. So we know that Rahu is perhaps going to play some tricks on us in the 11th house, and that was one of the karakas that we came up with. We also can see that Mars and Mercury are in a water sign. They're in not only a water sign of Cancer, but they're in Cancer that represents canals as well. So it's kind of affirming the themes that we were thinking that we wanted to look at. And we could think about Mercury as being a project manager type of energy, and Mars as being a type of engineer energy. So, it's interesting that those two skill sets are there in the 4th house, in Cancer, a water sign and a sign of canals. Now, I don't know whether we can yet. Oh, yeah, I can. Maybe you can see that Shadbala table. I'll just point out to you how strong. We've got a very strong Venus. We've got a very strong Saturn, and the moon being the 3rd strongest. So Venus is the first in Shadbala. It's got 571 points. It's 173% of what's required. So this is a very strong Venus in its own home there in Taurus. Saturn is the second in Shadbala. It's got 566 points. That's 189% of what it needs. And the moon is also strong with 556 points and 154% of what it needs. So some very strong, powerful planets in this chart. Okay, that's a really quick overview of the Rashi chart, but what is going on at the transiting time? So according to the newspaper, it's 7:40 in the morning on the 23rd of March when this ship runs aground and goes horizontal across the canal. So what are some of the things that stand out from the transit chart? One is that we have Saturn right there on the 11th cusp. I'm just wondering if you can see that. I can't seem to get my mouse there. There we go. Here's Saturn right on top of the 11th cusp in Aquarius. So that's a couple of already indicators we were expecting, right? Saturn, the obstructor, on the 11th cusp of high-end vehicles. So that just seems to be a bit of a standout feature as far as transits go. Now we can also see that it's making a square to the Venus from the Rashi chart. That is that it's around about 19 degrees away. So Saturn's at 1038, Venus is at 1140. So within 1 degree of 90 degrees there. We also noticed that Aquarius is a fixed sign and Taurus is a fixed sign. So we were expecting to see some of that fixed sign energy. Then we've also got the transiting moon. It was also forming a square to the Saturn, the exalted Saturn in the natal chart. And these were the three strongest planets. Remember, we had Saturn, Venus, Moon as the three strong players in the Rashi chart. So they're all having an interesting experience at this time, the 23rd of March. We could also just note that it happens to be Venus Dasha. So we might expect that some Venus karma is being experienced. Okay. And let's just highlight again that we're seeing some of these things we're expecting. We're seeing Venus, we're seeing the 11th house cusp, we're seeing Saturn, we're seeing the moon, Venus, and we're seeing fixed signs. Okay. But why at that time exactly? So now let's have a look at the Varga charts of the transit time. I personally wanted to have a look at the D4. It's not actually the chart that is most represented, but to me it seems important. And when I do that, we're looking down here, we can notice that that Saturn in the sky, that actually is in Aquarius in the night sky. If you looked up on, and especially on that D1 view, you're going to see Saturn in Aquarius. But when you allocate it for the D4, Saturn comes in and it's right on top of Venus. So it's at 1235 and Venus on the birth chart is at 1144. So in the D4 transiting chart, Saturn has gone right on top of that vehicle, Venus, in a fixed sign of Taurus. And it's within 1 degree. So I do think that the D4 does affirm that that obstructive energy, Saturn onto Venus, is resonating in the D4. Just reminding you of those key characters again. Okay, now what about in the D16 at this time? So we know that this is the chart that is specifically for vehicles, and this is what's happening on the 23rd of March at 7:40 in the morning. And the standout feature that probably jumps out to you as well is that we've got a whole bunch of planets in Taurus, the fixed sign. And if we bring up, I think I have for you here, just a reminder of the D16. In the D16 by transit, we've got Venus, which is the vehicle. We've got Sun, which is the body of the vehicle. We've got Mercury, which is the journey of the vehicle. And we've got Mars, which is the mechanics and the electrical. So all of those have placed themselves in a fixed sign that we happen to know in the D4 is getting that Saturn on top of it, or if you just want to stick with the D1, it's getting the square energy from Saturn. That square energy from Saturn, you have to remember, I don't read generally the outer planets, but Uranus is also in that sign of Taurus at the moment. So there's quite a lot of activation between Saturn and Uranus. So plenty happening. And we noticed in the D16 that we've got all of these representations of the vehicle are all stuck in Taurus. And we also noticed that Rahu and Ketu, the nodes, are with Jupiter. And if we go back to the shipping business, it's represented by Jupiter, and it's been thrown a bit of a wobbly. It's getting both nodes. And where is it getting them? In Cancer. And what did we expect would be happening in Cancer? We were looking for canals. So the shipping business has got both nodes in canals, and then the vehicles are in a fixed sign where we know that they're receiving that obstructive energy from Saturn. So fascinating, right? Like what it is that triggers, we had actual transiting planets in the sky in places that were sensitive, like on that 11th cusp. We had Saturn right on top of the 11th cusp. Square to Venus, and also we had the moon square as well. So we had transits that you could see in the sky, but when you look at the Varga charts of those transiting times, you see that they're echoing these same indicators. So it's very interesting. Now, what about the freeing? So there were many attempts. Obviously, this is a really important channel, and a lot of money is getting held up and obstructed. So lots of different attempts. But as we saw from the news story, that one of the things they did was the full moon. So on that night between the 28th and 29th, the moon was full. And I've just put it in here. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit for you. Oops, I think we've gone forward. Let's go back one screen. Okay, this is when the moon is full, because we've got the moon at 8:40, we've got the sun at 8:20. So somewhere round about here, which is actually 9:30 at night. And we can see that is when the moon was full. But in the D16, we've still got Mars there, debilitated in the canal in Cancer. And we've got all those planets that were representing the body of the ship. So we've got the body of the ship with the sun, we've got Venus, the vehicle itself, we've got Jupiter, the shipping business, and then the moon that's supposed to be full, right? In the D16, they're in a fixed sign of Leo. So they're still a bit stuck. So even though the full moon came and they did use it and it did provide support, it wasn't quite enough to really release the vehicle. And in fact, the vehicle was released, the boat, the ship, the Ever Given was released at 3 p.m. So this is the little bit later down the after the full moon during the night, now we're getting during the day. And what do we see? That on the transit chart, actually what happened, that moon went past full. Can you see it there? It went past full and it started moving over the Saturn, that exalted Saturn. And it was when it moved over that exalted Saturn that actually at 3 p.m., this boat really was freed. So I think that that's interesting. That happened in Libra, which is an active sign. So a little bit of help from Saturn being in the active sign there. Now, and Venus also moved. Remember, it was in Leo during the full moon, fixed sign. It's come into a mutable sign in the D16. And can you also see, oops, let's go back. Can you also see, where am I here? that the moon in the D16 came into Aquarius, where we know Saturn is in real life, so helping Saturn there, pushing it along, and was with the 11th cusp of high-end vehicles. So it feels like the full moon was important, but it took a little bit longer than the full moon, and we can see that because of these indicators in the D16, that they were more indicating freedom and movement and support for this activation a little bit after the full moon. So I thought that was really fascinating too. Now, I also, of course, when you're looking at these charts, you go back and forth and you look at all the time. I just happened to notice that during the period where the boat was stuck, so this is on the 26th of March, can you see in the D16 all of these planets stuck in the canal? Very few of the planets not involved there. So I thought that was really interesting. We had everything except the water, Mars, and Saturn. So, I think that it's just fascinating that these karikas, these indicators, are playing out at different levels in the chart, helping to provide that resonance that we can be sure that something's going to happen. So, in conclusion, as I really enjoy reading news articles and then having a look at what's going on in the astrology, one of the things that we can take away is that the repeated placement of those expected indicators was really there to be seen, whether it was in the birth chart of Egypt, whether it was in the transiting chart of the time, whether it was in the D4 or the D16. We saw Saturn, we saw Venus, we saw Cancer, we saw the 11th cusp, and we saw those fixed signs. And that's exactly what we were expecting to see. So it's very affirming, that if you go look at what your indicators that you should be seeing and then you go see them, it's kind of gives you this sense of confirmation. And then I think it's also, this particular press article is a really it's a really good one to explore how to use the Varga charts with trigger transits, because as an astrologer, it's hard to see what's going to happen in the future. And you want to see it there in the chart. You want to see it by transit, but sometimes still it doesn't happen. So you really want to see it resonating in the appropriate Varga chart. And in this one, we had the transiting Saturn in the sky was going square to natal Venus. But that was going to be happening over several weeks. So why did this obstruction occur when it did? And we noticed that in the sky, Saturn was going over the 11th cusp of the birth chart. And that 11th cusp representing the body, cusp represent physical things. And this is physically a high-end vehicle, an extremely expensive vehicle. Transiting Saturn in the D4 was right on top of natal vehicles, that native Venus, which represents vehicles. So we know that obstructive energy was right there in the D4. And then we have 4 planets were transiting the fixed sign of Taurus in the D16, while Jupiter was with the nodes in another fixed sign in the D16. So these were kind of the contributing energies that firmed up this opportunity. And yet what we did see was that the ship was freed. And we can notice that although Saturn is going to be square to Venus for several weeks in the sky, in truth, in the birth chart of Egypt, Venus was the strongest by Shadbala. So yes, Saturn is very strong. It was able to activate a real square energy, create an obstruction. But in the end, in not too short a time, really, when you think that pattern is going to be there for a whole, say, 4 or 5 weeks, in less than a week, Venus was able to be freed and win out over that obstruction. So I think it bears out the Shadbala. Great. If you want to read a chart like this, if you want to become more comfortable with the Varga charts, with Shadbala, and with timing, with trigger transits, I can only recommend, going through the Teachable course, the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program. It took me from not reading charts to having a look at all this detail. If you want to gain that confidence and be able to put your reasoning about your astrology together in a systematic way, I'll put the link in the description on YouTube. All right, I hope that you've enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed the unfolding story of the Ever Given, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Okay, until then, stay well.